So greetings from Turku, Finland. We are here enjoying very nice 14-degree weather. And we just heard from most of our colleagues in Europe that are burning and about 30 degrees. So we are now enjoying how long it ever lasts. So my name is Riikka Puntila Dodd, and I'm here to talk about something that is really not what I do for a living nowadays, but that is part of my secret background. So before starting my marine science studies, I actually did study terrestrial ecology, and I've done a fair share of forest inventories, mainly concentrating on old forest indicators, species like polypores. So I'm not completely out of my comfort zone here. And here's my colleague. Can introduce himself.
Yeah, Tan Phat Huynh. I'm a professor of chemistry at the Åbo Akademi.
Yes.
Yeah. So my main research is also related to partly with planetary health, which we investigate, for example, the plant volatile organic compounds and how it's changed with this current anthropogenic period.
Yes. Thank you. And then we are joined by Kathleen from Trinity College. Do you want to introduce yourself too?
Yeah, sure. I'm Kathleen Conroy. I am a PhD student at Trinity College Dublin, and my background is in environmental science and biodiversity, but I'm now focusing mostly on forest and land use change.
So we're talking about planetary boundaries, a little bit about what is an ecosystem. That's what I do for a living, but mostly marine systems. What does a forest mean? And how forest ecosystems link to forest health and forest ecosystem services. Then we're going to talk about land use, how land use change, what is the role of agriculture and forestry, how they link to biodiversity and biodiversity loss. Then we're going to see some examples from case studies, how deforestation is impacting in different parts of the globe. Then we're going to talk about how climate change impacts on forest and forest health. And then lastly, we're going to hear about the monitoring strategies for forest health using VOCs. Well, what is an ecosystem? Ecosystem is defined by boundaries, spatial boundaries, and everything that lives in it, and also all the abiotic, non-living components that impact it. Ecosystems start from individual level. They actually start from genetic level that also impact the individual level. Then to population level that is comprised of several individuals of same species or same taxa. To species assemblage that describes all the living organisms that are living in the same place in the same time. Ecosystem takes into account of all the abiotic conditions, also the interactions between the species and between the abiotic parameters. The next level is biome, which is a regional ecosystem composition. And the last one is a biosphere. That links very heavily to our ideas in PATH, because biosphere describes the whole planet and all the ecosystems in the planet. Then what is an ecosystem? In practice, here's a nice picture of a very famous cartoon in Finland called Horrible Nature. And they here show aspects of a forest from here in the Northern Hemisphere quite nicely. So forest includes a lot of different aspects, different animals, different abiotic things, and also different habitats. So it's a mixture of things. It can be described with different aspects of diversity within animals or within vegetation. It can be described with habitat diversity. So here we see a little lake here that is like a bordering habitat, which is the protective zone here, a flood zone. And then different aspects like dead wood that here is helping the ecosystem. And here you can also see that there's different levels of animals here or organisms. So all ecosystems are comprised of different trophic compartments. Primary production is turned into energy, or it's trapping energy from the sun, and then it moves gradually in the ecosystem through food webs. And always the ecosystem gets its production from primary producers. In a terrestrial ecosystem, it's everything that is green, that is then eaten by grazers, then eaten by first-degree predators, secondary consumers, and then finally by the top predators in a system. Well, ecosystems function in a close association with each other, and it's easily disturbed. Ecosystems provide us many goods and services, and they are often called ecosystem services. And if the ecosystem gets disturbed, also the ecosystem services get disturbed. We get a lot of good services from forests. Here, just examples such as lumber, game, genetic resources. That is an emerging aspect. So many of the organisms in the forest can be also used in industry or medical industry. We get clean water from forests. Forests filtrate a lot of water, and there's a lot of freshwater sources located in forests. And then we also get other kinds of food. In Finland, it's very popular, for example, to pick mushrooms and berries from forest. Forests also provide these sorts of services called regulating services. A lot of CO2, carbon dioxide from air is sequestered in forest wood and vegetation in forests. Forests take a lot of air purification responsibilities in the world and also control a lot of erosion. So all the habitats that are vegetated can control also against erosion and flooding. Forests also provide a lot of cultural services, something that we don't often think about. One emerging idea along with the genetic diversity or genetic resources is also microbiome. This is a very popular research item right now to study how forest microbiome may actually protect humans against a lot of pathogens. Forests comprise 30% of Earth's land area. Of those, 45% of forests are in tropical areas, 27% are in temperate areas, and forests are considered the largest carbon storage on the globe. The world has lost about 101 million hectares of tree cover between 2000 and 2020, which is a lot of area. And I would like to also highlight that tree cover is not necessarily the same thing as a functioning forest ecosystem. So we have probably lost a lot of important ecosystems also, even though we have lost a massive amount of tree cover. Because only 36% of the forests on the globe are actually primary forests in a more or less pristine condition or natural condition. Then back to the planetary boundaries. The way we humans impact our globe can be quantified, for example, using this concept of planetary boundaries that was developed by Rockström et al. 2009, when the first assessment of planetary boundaries came. This has been done after that year in 2015, 2023, and now 25. They have assessed different number of boundaries, but overall, our impact has increased, even during this quite brief time. We have started impacting the globe more and more. As a comparison, in 2009, 7 planetary boundaries were assessed, 3 of them were crossed, whereas now, 2025, 9 boundaries have been assessed and 7 have been already crossed. And the latest one has been the ocean acidification. The planetary boundary metrics have been quantified in different ways. These are the nine boundaries that are quantified. And then there is the status and the variables that are quantified and the boundaries that are considered to be as a safe zone. Many of these actually link to forests, but there is this one bit here in the middle, the land system change, that is most closely correlated with forests. And here, just to zoom in to the latest planetary boundary assessment. And I identified here the land system change as one of the biggest ones that are related to forestry. But there are others, such as biosphere integrity and biogeochemical flows. And if we really think about it, almost all of these are somehow linked to forests or marine organisms too. So planetary boundaries are not distinct, so they are all interlinked, just like ecosystems. And I think now it's time to move on with Kathleen.
Alrighty. So I'll be talking about land use and land cover. So the first thing I wanted to kind of go through is the definitions, because land use and land cover I've found are oftentimes used as the same term. They're used as synonyms of each other, but they have very distinct definitions and distinct uses. So land use is the total arrangements, activities, and inputs that people undertake in a certain land cover type. So this definition is very human-centric. It depends on how humans are using the land and what activities that are occurring there. Land cover, on the other hand, is defined as the observed physical and biological cover on the Earth's land as vegetation or man-made features. So this is much more nature-focused, and it's based on the different states and natural processes that are occurring on the land. So again, these are very distinct, and also the way in which they're measured are slightly different. Land use can only be effectively measured by taking surveys and actually going on the land and seeing how they are being used. Land cover, on the other hand, you can use different satellite imagery and maps to see what land, how the land is looking from like above, to see how much, say, trees are on the land, to see if it would be considered a forest, what kind of trees are there. We can see all those things using satellites. There oftentimes is an overlap, so sometimes land cover will be linked back to land use, but there is a little bit of a problem there because sometimes that will lead to some biasing and maybe a little bit of a misrepresentation, because we might think that a land cover looks one way, but the land might be used for a completely different purpose. So that's just kind of a distinction to use between land use and land cover, because oftentimes they are linked or grouped together. So when we're talking about land cover change, why does it happen? Oftentimes people think that this might be a bad process, or it might be something to kind of think negatively towards. But land cover change can be a very natural process. It occurs naturally. Things like volcano activity or even forest fires, when they are occurring naturally, these are processes that will cause complete land cover change, where a forest might be wiped out due to a natural land forest fire. Then the land is cleared, and then natural succession will occur. But there's something to remember, that oftentimes land cover change can have more anthropogenic origins, and oftentimes they are linked back to human activity. So these are things through like cultural expansion. So we want more land to grow more food, or urbanization. So our urban sprawl is growing because we want more places to live, and also logging, which affects forestry directly, where we remove timber for our own use. Agriculture expansion and urbanization also directly impact other ecosystem types. It's not just forestry. So we are losing grasslands. We're using other natural areas as well to these processes. And I just put as a link at the bottom to kind of how we might measure these things is by using the system of environmental economic accounting, ecosystem accounting. They have different approaches to assess ecosystem services. And one of the starting points is to actually look at extent. So you're looking at how these ecosystem types are changing over time. Are they expanding? Are they growing? Or are they shrinking? And to what extent? And then you can oftentimes link that back to what processes are occurring that are making these things happen. Also with the CEA, you can also track the condition of ecosystems, and then link those all back to ecosystem services that area is providing. So that's just like one little example of how one might measure these things. So just to understand, land cover change is occurring all throughout the world. In this map here that we're seeing, the yellow areas are places that are experiencing one ecosystem like kind of changeover, But the red areas, which we can see is occurring in a lot of areas, is multiple change events occurring. So land cover changing from one to another. And again, sometimes these are natural processes, but more often than that, not. It's anthropogenic or anthropogenic accelerated. So these might be natural processes that people are just kind of helping along to get what they want. And oftentimes this is linked to agriculture. So agriculture is very important to us. We need food, and it's an important land cover type globally. So agricultural land covers approximately 38% of the earth, with approximately 1/3 of the land being used for crops and 2/3 used for animal grazing or meadows. And one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that our population is growing. We're going to have several billion people more on the planet, and we need to be able to feed everyone and feed everyone to the amount of food that they need. But one of the things that we have to keep in mind when we talk about agriculture too is that there are different demands that we are putting on our natural systems in order to produce the kinds of food that we are looking for. So in recent years, there has been a higher demand for animal-based. So this is a graph showing the amount of protein consumed and where that protein source comes from. So in especially the global north, so Europe and North America, we're looking at a lot of more animal-based proteins being consumed. But we are seeing this kind of this trend happening globally where different continents, different areas are consuming more animal-based proteins. So we're looking at places in Asia and Africa and Latin America. They're all consuming a little bit more animal-based proteins than before, with North America and Europe kind of leading the way with the most amount of animal-based proteins. So as I said before, the animals require a little bit more land. So in order to meet these demands and with our growing population, we have to be able to kind of agriculture will have to make a kind of a decision about, are we going to meet these demands, or will people kind of slightly change their eating habits? This is the trade-offs that we have to take into consideration when we're talking about agriculture. And when we're talking about agriculture conversion as too, it's more than just a land use change problem. We're going to have multiple impacts seen throughout the ecosystem. So there are going to be impacts on soil. Agriculture is can be very demanding on the amount of nutrients that are required. So things like nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium will go way down. And in order to have the plants kind of maximize the amount of output they're giving, farmers will oftentimes put fertilizer on the land, and that's very also taxing on the soil. It can lead, and if the soil isn't allowed to follow or kind of leave for a little while, it can oftentimes lead to infertile soil after a while, and that can cause erosion and other problems down the line. So we have to keep in mind soil health and how do we keep soil healthy moving forward, while also kind of maximizing our agricultural needs. So the other problem oftentimes associated with agricultural conversion is water quality. So again, that kind of goes into the different runoffs that come from agricultural output. So that might be from animals, or it could be runoff from the fertilizer put onto the soil. But if that gets into our waterways, that can lead to dead zones and hypoxia in lakes and different water bodies, which is very bad. And air quality as well can also be impacted by agricultural processes, and that's just output from either the machinery used to create the different agricultural things needed, and also the animals that are on the land. So these two kind of will combine to create some air quality issues. And finally, the topic I'm going to talk a little bit more about now is biodiversity and how agricultural is impacting the biodiversity also seen. So biodiversity, what is biodiversity? Oftentimes it is just defined as the diversity of life, and that's all good. And people oftentimes bring to mind kind of the bigger animals, oftentimes mammals. So we're talking about polar bears and panda bears and lions and tigers and all those kind of charismatic animals. But we're also talking about everything else in between. So we're talking about plants and fungi and reptiles and amphibians and even the little microbes in the soil. So biodiversity is the diversity of life, but it's so much more than that. It's the whole variety of life forms on Earth, ranging from mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, fish, insects, and other invertebrates to plants, fungi, algae, and microorganisms. So we're talking about anything that's alive. We're kind of considering it into biodiversity. So we have a definition of biodiversity. This is oftentimes the definition that is used, But then when we actually talk about biodiversity, things get a little bit more complicated. So we have different types of diversity. We have genetic diversity, we have species diversity, and we have ecosystem diversity. So when we're talking about biodiversity, or especially change in biodiversity or loss of biodiversity, we need to be really specific about what is actually being lost, what is actually changing, so that we're all on the same page, because a loss of genetic diversity is much different than a loss of species diversity. So we have to make sure that we're on the same page. Also within biodiversity, we have other things that you might hear of too, such as alpha, beta, gamma diversity. And then that's again looking at kind of what is being compared. So are we looking at one ecosystem over time? Are we comparing two different ecosystems? So again, it just kind of goes into what is being looked at. So when we're talking about biodiversity, we have to be very specific about what actual diversity are we looking at. So if we're talking about biodiversity in terms of species, biodiversity loss is actually seen as a crisis. And when we pair that with the climate change crisis that we're also currently in, we see these as twin crises. So these are two crises occurring concurrently and having impacts on each other. So biodiversity loss crisis that we're currently in is that we're seeing a loss of species at a much higher rate than the background rate. And this is oftentimes attributed to humans. So this is anthropogenic. And again, species loss is kind of normal, and we can see species being lost at different rates throughout time, but the rate in which they're being lost now is just much higher. Sometimes species go extinct for very normal reasons, but again, the rate at which it's happening now is much higher than expected. So when we're talking about change from forest to agriculture and the impacts on biodiversity, what we're talking about is converting the land from forest to agricultural land. And the most obvious biodiversity loss is the loss of tree species present. However, there's also other losses that occur, and that's the loss of land for fauna. So that's over 6,500 animal species are found in forests. That's also a loss for flora, as 4,500 plant species are found in forests. And that's the loss also for fungi, because certain fungi species called ectomycorrhizal fungi will only associate with certain tree species in certain forests. So again, these are kind of the lower end of what is probably the species found in these forests. And they would all be impacted by the loss of forest or the conversion of forest to agricultural land. So as some case studies, I'm just going to talk briefly about Brazil and Indonesia and kind of the conflict there between forestry and agricultural demands. So as many people know, Brazil is a country in South America, and large areas of Brazil are composed of the Amazon rainforest. And large areas of this old growth Amazon are being removed through slash and burn deforestation. So that's when large areas of the Amazon are being slashed. So that's either with machetes or axes and chainsaws, and then the area is being burnt. And it's just one of the most fastest and effective ways of clearing the area. And it's being cleared so that it can make suitable habitat for cattle. So they're turning this land into pasture. And the reason why they're turning it into pasture is because beef is then exported to the global north, and they can get really high prices for this beef because it's in high demand. As we saw earlier, there's more demand in the global north for beef. It's also being removed for other reasons as well. So it can sometimes also be removed for other vegetation products. It's also, there's also seeing deforestation for illegal logging, because these are old growth large trees, and they're oftentimes what the global north would consider exotic trees. So and they're really good for building materials. So they want to be, they can get high prices for these, like a good mahogany or any other kind of like highly sought after tree species. And again, as we see, like through time, deforestation is decreasing, but the land that's already been converted to pasture is oftentimes staying in pasture. So it's actually kind of accumulating over time. And then in Indonesia too, there's another kind of conflict occurring there, and that's between palm oil and forestry. So oftentimes in Indonesia, large areas of land was being removed, in order to make way for the industrial oil palm expansion. So this is land being cleared in order to grow palm oil, and that's just because they had a high price for it, and they could make a lot of money through the oil palm expansion. So again, these are just two examples, and deforestation is very localized too. So you have to be also kind of careful when you talk about deforestation, because to kind of generalize it and say global deforestation, that's okay. But in parts of Europe and North America, we are actually seeing increase in forestry in recent years. And in parts of Southeast Asia, they have also seen increase in forestry. However, in places like areas in South America and Africa, they are seeing continentally a decrease in forestry. So again, it's very kind of region specific and even country specific. So I think that's what I have for you today.
Kathleen talked about land use change. Sometimes a lot of change happens without the land type actually changing. Here is a photo, an aerial photo of Finland, where part of the forest has been clear cut. Clear cutting for decades was basically the only method of harvesting wood in Finland. Only very recently, forestry has accepted alternative ways of maintaining forestry, such as continuous growth. And you can only imagine what happens to the forest as an ecosystem when it goes from this wooded type to the whole clear cut. And this doesn't necessarily only impact the megafauna or the charismatic organisms there, but as you can see here, it often includes severe modifications of the water balance. So here, the whole ground has been basically ditched. So it changes the microbiota, the sun impacts are completely different. The shrubs are basically gone, not to even mention about the symbionts such as fungi in the soil. So the changes are pretty massive, even though technically this part is still going to be forest when the new seedlings are going to be put in. So forestry also has massive impacts, although it will remain as a forest technically. Kathleen also mentioned the global climate change that is going to be impacting all the ecosystems in the world, including forests. With forests, though, the impacts are largely unknown. There is several that are positive, most that are negative, and they impact the different aspects of the ecosystem. So technically, the increased CO2 may increase productivity, so the trees will grow faster and they might grow bigger. But there will be significant changes in rainfall, temperature, obviously, and the prevalence of extreme events such as drought, flooding, or even storms that will have impacts due to wind. They will impact the productivity, but they will also impact the health of forests, which will be following these two slides. And it will also impact quite a bit the range of different organisms and the habitat that the forest can provide for them. One of the very significant impacts will be the increased risk of forest fires and the spread of pests, both native and non-native ones. And then there will be a massive change in biodiversity that will have mostly unpredictable impacts.
Yep. So, yeah, I will continue with kind of very specific case related to the forest health. So here we will mainly talk about volatile organic compounds. So as one may know that, for example, you can monitor the plant health, for example, through just visual observation of the plant grow and their development. But there is also another way that you can observe the plant health, for example, through secondary metabolites, or we call here the volatile organic compound VOC. So briefly, VOC, so one can categorize them in three, for example, depending on their volatility. For example, they can have volatile organic compound VOC, or they can have semi-volatile organic compound SVOC, or they can have non-volatile organic compound. kind of NBOC we called. And so they are now, we see that they are at the molecular level, and for that, the plant use them. For example, one may know that the VOC is the way that plant they show how they can communicate with each other. For example, in one case that kind of the plant scientist observed, they call it talking trees. So it means that like the plant, they have people have a hypothesis that they thought maybe the plant they can use the volatile organic compound VOC to communicate with each other. So here in this kind of figures, one see that, for example, if I create a situation that the plant they attacked by the herbivores. So there is an observation that when the plant they attacked by the herbivores, so they release like a kind of VOC fingerprint, and then they observe in the neighbor trees, so they somehow develop also the defense mechanism. So that is kind of still kind of under investigation, but like a larger pictures. What we want to see in our consortium here, like at Åbo Akademi, together with other Finnish university, is that so since the plant and plant communication, they depend heavily on the VOC fingerprint. But now, due to the kind of human activities that we see, our colleague Riikka and Kathleen mentioned. So here in this figure, in this scheme, you will see the hypothesis is that the VOC, they can be chemically modified. For example, due to the human activity, you generate different kind of gases, pollutants, and the climate change, temperature change, the change in the ozone in the atmosphere. So the hypothesis is that the way of the communication of the plant will be modified and is kind of unknown. So what we want to see is that, okay, whether we can monitor the dynamic change of the VOC, for example, the plant attacked by the herbivore, the VOC fingerprint release, but through when they release to the air, what is the hypothesis here? For example, either there was no problem, or because of human activities, the VOC, they will be, for example, oxidized, reduced, they form a different chemical compounds. And not only that, those chemical compounds can continue, for example, precipitate, and then they can form like a new type of aerosols. So, and those kind of things is very complex, and we don't know what that it will affect not only the communication, but also the plant health, because they cannot recognize the signal of each other, for example. And for that, so the analytical instrument in our consortium is important. So we not only monitor, for example, the volatiles, for example, with mass spectrometer that you can see here, acronym as MS, but also we have the mass spectrometer also to monitor the aerosol as well. And also we depend heavily on the sampling system. For example, you need to collect the volatiles from plants. So for that, so we also develop the volatile plant sampling system as well. And so the mass spectrometer that you saw here, we call like targeted methods. So it means that you can identify precisely the list of VOC that release from plants or from the air. But there is also another way we call like VOC fingerprint. So it's like the way how you smell wine or fragrance. So you don't really know the compound, but you know the patterns. So here we call, for example, non-targeted methods, and we can use, for example, electronic sensors. And one can also study not only with the real samples provided by our partner, but one can also think advanced, like if you want to formulate simulated samples, that when the situation, for example, is difficult, or you want just to study precisely which effect of which VOC particularly. So one can also use the volatile generator instrument, or you can create a mixture of volatiles to see the impact of volatile to the plant growth, for example. And yeah, so for that, I will also end here my talk. But yeah, also mention that we have a center of excellence in anthropogenic chemical ecology of forests in Finland. So so this is what I mentioned is our key study in this center.
And with that, we will end our presentation. Thank you very much for your attention, and we'll hope to be able to teach a little bit more about forest ecology soon. Thanks, everybody.